He's also helped me in the programming committee, so he's been a great help with this show. So I'm going to let him kind of take this away. It's social commerce, right? Which I actually Googled right before we did this, and apparently social commerce was a term coined by Yahoo in 2005 or 6 or something, which I didn't know. But this is about social plus commerce, not necessarily social commerce as a thing. So I'm going to let them kind of get into all that, and I'm just eating into their time. Anyway, take it away, guys.
Thank you, Ross. Appreciate everyone coming back in that did come back in, that I can see at least because these lights are incredibly bright. As Ross alluded to, I've been to a number of these. I think I counted, this is my 8th Search Insider Summit, 6th one here. And I've done a number of other events with MediaPost, love being at these all the time. So I think it's interesting when we talk about the Search Insider Summit and the content that we talked about specifically today. It seems like we're very much moving away what was traditionally search, becoming much more of these sort of performance discussions. So I think it's kind of turning into a performance summit versus a search, which I think is the way that the industry is leading as well, which is why we have these two on stage. So I'll let these guys introduce themselves and get out of the way.
Hi, Keely Taylor. I look after social globally on behalf of the GroupM agencies.
Hi, I'm Adam Klein. I'm a marketing manager at Capital Brands. And for those who don't know, Capital Brands is the makers of the NutriBullet and Magic Bullet blenders. So
I am familiar with your work.
Excellent.
Great, so we want to talk about social commerce today. So Ross kind of alluded to it's something that's been around a little bit for a while, but it seems like it's picking up steam, particularly with the Facebooks and Instagram, Pinterest of the world, the behavior that's happening on there. So with that's kind of the first question, right? From your guys' perspective, what has sort of led to this rise recently or this resurgence of social e-commerce that we're seeing?
So I think the thing in your right hand is a big driver of that. So the adoption of mobile, the fact that shopping carts now allow for mobile commerce to happen. Over 85% of impressions on social happen in mobile environments. So if you weren't able to complete a purchase, then it was not going to pick up. But I think the fact that there is so much opportunity and we're spending more and more time in a place that you can really have impulse buys really quickly has led to a lot of that new adoption.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I think just people are using their mobile phones in idle situations, waiting in line at the bank, grocery line, whatever it is, and getting on Instagram feeds and seeing aspirational products and being impulsive and buying products. It's a natural fit for social to be a new e-commerce environment.
Do you guys see a lot of impromptu Magic Bullet buys?
I mean, that's the core of our business. It's really it's selling the benefits of feeling better after having a smoothie. So I think a lot of people are impulsively making decisions about improving their diet, and a lot of that is through drinking smoothies.
On a day like after you ate cheese melted in front of a fireplace, people feel the benefits of smoothies. Okay.
Great time to buy right now, guys.
Yeah, and the amazing maple bacon too that just continues to stick in my stomach. I love all of it, by the way. So when we talk about social, I think historically, when we first started talking about social from a brand perspective, right, it was an organic discussion. And now we've got, obviously, Facebook being the second largest, whatever they are now, and even Amazon and some of the things that it sort of teeters on a social perspective as well. So do you guys see more performance, better performance? What does organic social look like sort of community management and those sort of things versus the paid either commerce or just paid sort of media within social in general?
I'm going to be a little bit biased coming from a big media agency. There's not a lot of opportunity from an organic social perspective. That's not to say that your customers don't expect to be able to have a conversation with you. However, in terms of tracking, in terms of the breadth of targeting opportunities, the types of ways in which you can message different audiences, organic really has kind of fallen by the wayside. I think that the next evolution and where people are starting to spend their time, whether it's social or not, is messaging. So one-to-one, one-to-few. And I think that that will become the resurgence of community management, not happening on a page. People don't really go to those pages. But it'll happen within facilitated conversations. So a lot of the voice stuff that was mentioned before, I think absolutely applies to the chatbot stuff as well.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think from the brand side, organic's a place where we like to get our customers UGC up and have that authentic conversation with our customers who are excited about making their morning smoothie or their post-workout smoothie or whatever it is, and we really want to put a spotlight on that, and I think organic's great for that. It's not necessarily something we would put significant dollars of paid behind, and that's really where the opportunities are for scale. So we treat organic just for that purpose.
And what platforms are you guys using? What are you know, we know Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, LinkedIn, Twitter. Is that where your dollars are focused? Is that where the brand's attention are focused, either from your perspective?
Sure. So you really can't get away from Facebook in terms of scale, in terms of maturity of the platform that they have, especially Instagram. So you do start to see the demographic split. A little bit older might still go to the big blue app. A little bit younger might be going to someplace like Instagram. And then you start to see that battle for the second dollar. So depending on what your product is, Pinterest makes a lot of sense for the categories are kind of known and loved for. And then in my remit, since it's global, we're really starting to see a lot of travel and luxury brands asking us, what does WeChat look like outside of mainland China? So certainly would look at the wealth and the openness of the Chinese consumer as they go to different places, especially if you have a coveted brand, whether that be an Americana kind of thing or you're a fashion house.
Yeah, I don't know if I have too much more to add because we basically run pure Facebook and Instagram. We dabbled with a couple others, but the visual mediums within those two are just so far superior than a lot of the other platforms, so that's where we stick.
And so, Kelly, you mentioned WeChat. Like, what's the next little platform that we should be keeping our eyes on?
So I think WeChat is big and will continue to be big. What I like about it specifically from a performance perspective is they have a whole payment processing. They have WeChat Pay. So for CPG or FMCG brands, if you have a coupon, you're targeting someone on WeChat, you can see all the way through redemption if they happen to use that payment provider, which is really different than the trade relationships. We sent you X amount of pallets, did you sell those through? Attribution's kind of a finger in the air still. So I like understanding and learning still on WeChat. One that you can't escape in terms of their awareness driving marketing right now is one called TikTok. It's known as Douyin in China. It came out of China. Their parent brand bought Musical.ly, so if you have kids that really love to spend time pretending to be their favorite pop stars, singing their songs, that has evolving marketing opportunities. That said, I would not be representing GroupM without talking about brand safety. There are some question marks there right now, but certainly if you have a brand that you need to have relevance with your next generation of consumers, that younger millennial, that Gen Z, TikTok would be worth looking at. Definitely Instagram, probably not so much Facebook as a standalone thing that you would buy.
And I don't think it's just kids either. John Whitfield has music videos on Musical.ly as well.
My mistake.
Yeah. He's a great AC/DC. Don't ask him to sing because he'll probably do it right now. So kind of connecting the conversations that were had earlier, I mean, what about platforms like Amazon Spark, right? Where they're designed to be sort of a recommendation engine, a conversation engine that's almost purely e-commerce based, right? Like the design for all of Spark is to get you to buy something immediately, right? So do you guys play in that? Do your brands, Magic Bullet, do you guys look into that? Or?
We actually don't, so that's it to do for me, Amazon Spark.
They have a navigation problem. If they decided to put focus and attention on it, they could kill Pinterest. Not even really exaggerating. I have seen that they have started to dabble in influencers. I think that the level of UGC that they want to have on Spark before they'd make it big and known. But I think social and Amazon is something yet to come, and I think it will be really formidable once it's there.
It's not going to be a Google Plus kind of thing? Hopefully not.
R.I.P.
Yeah. So you mentioned a little bit earlier as we talk about data privacy and the concerns around those perspectives, and I'm really interested to get big GroupM perspective versus the brand side too. The social platforms, I mean, obviously Facebook has been in a whirlwind of its own, right? So how do you have those conversations, whether it's on the brand side on a day-to-day with your CMO or whether it's globally with CMOs across the world? How do you have that conversation about the trust in the platform? The performance is always going to be there, presumably, but how do you work around that, all the bullshit around that right now?
So one of the big things that our hand has been forced as an industry is with GDPR and the big platforms deciding that would have a global implication. So I am not a lawyer, but I've been playing one on TV, talking about proclivity of contracts, making sure that brands understand what data had been used. Do they want to continue to use it? GDPR is more than a slap on the wrist. So a lot of our brands are big multinationals, and we have to have those conversations, which meant having conversations with their counsel, which meant really long time horizons. So we started looking for suitable alternatives. I think the great news is we've been able to find them, save some categories where there's really not a deep connection with that consumer. And then ultimately, many brands, and I think rightfully, had already had a good sense of who their consumer was and the amount of explicit consent that they had to communicate with them. So figuring out where CRM should plug in to the ecosystem. So it is very much an ongoing conversation, but I think that there's a lot more consumer understanding and an expectation. I think what we don't have yet is making sure that there's useful customization. I think personalization, you don't necessarily need to chase that. You know, if you have an ad and it says, "Hi Keely," well, that didn't do much for me. Do you know that I live in New York and the weather is gonna be crappy for the next 4 months? That helps and provides me some utility. So my hope is that having this spotlight shined on the data and the conversation and the value exchange to customers that was forced by GDPR means we have more useful and relevant ads.
And real quick, from the brand side, we just have to rely on partners like GroupM and whomever else are experts in the space to make sure we're compliant on all those accounts.
What am I next? How much time do we have, Ross? I got 62 questions left here, so I want to make sure that I'm working through. Okay, all right. So you're in a room full of presumably search marketers that are kind of morphing into performance marketers. What is social commerce specifically? What does that look like from a performance standpoint compared to a search or Amazon buying directly, eBay, the other marketplaces that exist and that are out there? Like, is this an easy conversation? Is this an easy sell? Are you having the conversations around data because the platform performance speaks for itself, or are you having to sell that in? What are those conversations like?
So I've loved that we have been talking about the death of last click. Social commerce does not present itself in the same light as retargeting and as lower funnel branded, very specific search keywords. That said, I think that the role that social can fulfill, especially if you're starting to look at yourself as more of a performance-based marketer, is consideration. You have really good signals of what someone is interested in. You have the opportunity to connect your brand to them in a meaningful way. And there are some new ad placements, like collection ads, for instance, on Facebook right now. It's a video up top, and then it incorporates your product feed underneath. So if you think about an awareness budget, a brand budget, and a performance budget, well, where does that sit? Well, the video, well, people don't really watch the video all the way through. Well, you're right, because they actually went to your website and they're already shopping for you. So living in that space and being able to talk about not just best ROI, but what is filling the funnel, what is presenting the brand in a way that you're talking to new customers in a new way. I think some of the innovation like collection ads is an interesting place, and that's, to me, what feels like social commerce. And then further out on the horizon, I think that the Pinterest integration with Amazon through their, Snapchat integration with their lens into Amazon is a really interesting place.
Yeah, I don't know if I have too much more to add to that. That was well said.
Perfect. So Adam, I'll start with you on this one. The experience of social commerce, right, of a user not leaving that environment and going to a brand site and having that sort of traditional experience, is that is there degradation to the brand awareness, or is that actually adding to it because you're just offering a frictionless experience to that user now? Like, have you guys looked at that or understand?
Yeah, I mean, we're always trying to limit the number of clicks that a user has to take because there will be natural drop-off. So for us, if we can keep someone in their environment within social and go all the way to purchase and make that a frictionless experience, that's a win for a brand. So for us, we try to enable that wherever possible.
And Kayla, maybe from a global perspective.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think attribution and distribution really start to break down and fragment globally, so it's hard to have one conversation. Obviously, we've been talking a lot about Amazon in this room. It's Lazada in Singapore. It's unknown in India, which is a huge and growing economy. So I think what we're focusing on are what are the foundations, what are the building blocks that when we look at a platform that has a similar function, how do we have best practices and how do we figure out what's a little bit unique to tweak. But ultimately, the less clicks, the better. I think we all can agree on that.
And so are you having like traditional brand teams working with performance teams, or are these completely melding? Like what is social commerce doing from team structures and organization now as well?
Blowing minds. I mean, we can't help how a client is structured internally. We can't help that someone is gold on something and someone else is gold on something else. So what we have to do is continue to present the opportunity. And I think from a person that takes off their brand marketer hat and puts on their customer or consumer hat, they see that there's value. And so we look at things like test budget. We look at things like attribution, making sure that we have one end-to-end tracking system across to make sure that our hypothesis that having the opportunity to deliver the entire full funnel experience in one unit makes sense for that brand. Usually it does. But ultimately, we need to have more people in the room to make sure that that's a seamless experience from the beginning.
And Adam, I don't know if you guys are looking for something when you're building your own internal teams. Are you looking for certain talent, or when you're assessing agency relationships or something along those lines for all of the agency people in the world listening out?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we see the two as being, intertwined, the brand marketing through Facebook and the performance marketing. We think it makes sense for that to be under one team, and so we actually have an agency that helps out with that today. So that's pretty much how we treat it, is just one full funnel.
And how has social e-com changed your overall social strategies, and where are budgets coming from? How is this incremental opportunity? Are you stealing from somewhere else? And
yeah, it's unfortunately not incremental. I think it's, we have signals where customers are for us, and if we see there's strong signals within social, within Facebook, we shift the dollars towards that. I think if we were able to prove out that that was an incremental lift to the business, I think it's just reaching the customers in different places. It's not necessarily new customers for us, so it's harder to gain an incremental budget for a space just because it's enabled you to now make transactions.
Yeah, I'd say incrementality is a huge challenge. I would certainly caution if you have one function that is in-house and you look at something like a Facebook pixel, you're going to see a ton of incrementality because it's not deduplicated. So making sure that there is a source of truth beyond what any one publisher is telling you. It's a lesson old as time, but Facebook has made some policy decisions recently that are really leading people to have to use their Facebook pixel in order to understand conversions. If you're not familiar, they are no longer allowing third-party post-impression tracking from media ad servers. So there's a lot more triangulation that's needing to happen.
And then naturally, we couldn't get through a panel without talking about data and checking off the buzzword for bingo purposes. So what data sources are you using? Is this a platform-specific stuff? Are you being able to plug in your own first, second, third-party data? Like, what does that look like in compared to maybe what you had done if it was, say, an engagement sort of social strategy versus now it's like I want to sell more blenders? Is there a different data set? Are you using the same? Are you using it differently? Are you thinking about it differently? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we're using our ERP to track total sales, and then from there, using whatever inputs we have from Facebook Business, from various different tools we have in the business through Google Analytics and whatever else to kind of evaluate everything from a data perspective. But for us, we're looking at the totality of the business and seeing if incremental spends within Facebook is going to lead to incremental volume of sales for us, and that's how we track it from a data standpoint.
For us, the data conversation is a bit nuanced. So everyone, as we're going through this challenge of going from a cookie-based world into a person or identity-based world, no one person has the entire answer, a suite of people. And so we, within the GroupM world, are putting together an MPID. The hope is that we have a view across a broad suite of people that can kind of start to chip away at being beholden to a Google, a Facebook, an Amazon that has a lot of people-based information. None of it's quite there yet, so we're having to figure out where do we have better fidelity, and can we look at programmatic, can we look at search, where we would actually suppress delivering to those same people in social. Vice versa, if there's an understanding of an interest that really social has their finger on the pulse of, then how are we suppressing that type of signal elsewhere? So the ability to have modeled lookalikes is going to be really different. And depending on your brand, it might be really successful in social, or it might be not quite as successful in social, and you should look elsewhere. So that's why it's important to understand all of the different data sets that you have at your disposal, and not to run them all in all the places, because there are deduplication problems from an attribution standpoint.
And last sort of 2 questions in one here. First is, what is a brand that's doing this really well? Like who, if you're talking to a client outside of Capital Brands, of course, who would you point out and say they're doing this really well, that keep an eye on them and see what they're doing and take notes? And then secondly, where does this evolve? What does this look like in 5 years from now versus what it is now?
So I really like Sephora. I think that they're doing a great job testing into new places where they're providing utility. It's not, oh, my kid loves that site, so let's do something there. Specifically for beauty, it makes sense also to have that virtual trial, and that is a barrier for some product categories. So I really like what they're doing. And since it's a twofer, I'm really excited for AR and what that's going to bring to the space. The amount of good that comes of that in terms of connecting information to people, and then the more, impractical purposes, but useful for a brand, can I see the inside of a car without having to go to the dealership? Can I show my support for a big entertainment property? They have great IP. How cool is it that I can be my favorite superhero in the next Avengers? So I think the implications of AR are super interesting, and Snap was really early on in that space. They've gotten marketers more comfortable with understanding it and the implications, and now you can amortize that investment that much more broadly across places like Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, I'd like to think, Capital Brands is doing a decent job on, social commerce, but we're definitely not best in class at this point yet. But that's why we're attending these sort of conferences, learning from industry experts. But I like the, Away, the luggage company. I think they've done really great things. All the mattress sales, through Casper and everyone else that's, really utilizing the social space to build out entire companies. So that's really impressive. As far as where social commerce goes, I think Keely actually spoke to this a little earlier. Reducing friction of the purchase, of just having digital wallets in place and allowing people to make those impulse decisions. Entering in a credit card can really create a lot of friction for people making that purchase, and they'll just decide they don't actually need the product. So I think incorporating that in a more seamless way is going to be important. And then I think about companies like Venmo who are taking those sort of transactions and socializing them. I don't know exactly how brands are leveraging those sort of socialization of purchases, but potentially having communities built upon of people sharing what they're purchasing. I don't know if consumers are going to be interested in giving out that data of whether they purchased a certain brand, but I think that could be a really interesting place within a social arena to let brands kind of see who their high net promoters are.
I think that's an interesting point too. As much as we think that people want to watch a 30-second TV spot, they don't. They don't even want to read. It's all about emojis. Like if you think about what someone said that they Venmo'd for, it's emojis. So now's the time to be thinking about if your brand had to be a pictograph, because it's going to become one, how do you communicate that, and how do you not communicate a commodity? How do you communicate your brand? So the attention span is miserable and only getting worse.
So I've got a question. Well, let's let you guys ask a question before I have one. Anyone? All right, great, because I want to ask one anyway. So Keely brought up, WeChat and kind of how China's kind of leading from the front in this kind of subject, and I think that's really interesting because, it reminds me of China and the U.S. and the trade war, and I wanted to ask the whole group today, because it's like e-commerce day or whatever, how the trade war is impacting your business, whether it's, I don't know, Adam, is the cost of your goods going up? And Keely, do you have to pivot for your clients in a certain way because of it yet, or are you thinking about that? It's kind of a big question, I don't know. Yeah, or maybe it doesn't matter.
Globalization is critical for our business. We manufacture everything in China, which I'm sure is no surprise to anyone in here. It's definitely something where we've had ongoing negotiations with our factories and actually had to resource a factory because they threatened that costs were going up, and we actually had to make decisions on that end of do we stick with a certain factory, and what are the implications? Do we have to have futures that protect us from a financial standpoint on the prices of aluminum or metals or whatever else we're using? So
Yeah.
It's a real concern, everything that's happening.
Do we know yet, like, to what to do? On like the advertiser side, I mean, because I keep hearing that like the cost of goods won't go up till like next year or something, or is it already happening? I don't really know because I obviously don't know.
We're not seeing cost of goods increasing on our end, and so we would hope to not pass that along to the consumers. So that's
Right on, yeah.
good for us at this point.
I would
knock
say
on wood.
it's always humbling. So even before trade wars notwithstanding, if the price of corn went up significantly, then depending on the brand, manufacturers of pet food would have crazy implications on their budgets.
Yep.
We could have had the most thoughtful social commerce campaign in the history of the universe, but if corn prices went up, we weren't able to make up the volume needs there. So it's certainly humbling that
But like, does your pet food client like understand that, or do you have to tell them that?
Oh, no, they got that.
They got it, okay. I figured they might. I mean, at least I would hope that they do. Does anyone else want to say anything about the trade war and how it impacts their business, or because you're on the
Is
record?
the
Probably
live stream
don't.
still on?
Well, it is. I mean, we could turn it off. I'm just interested because I'm like, a watcher of this stuff as opposed to having much of a stake in it like you all do. But anyway, with that said, I mean, I don't know. Does anyone want to ask another question that can be answered? No? All right. Cool, guys. Clayton, thank you. Panel, thank you guys very much.